What if you could see the future written in the stars? What if God himself pulled back the veil of time and showed you empires that would rise and fall, kings who would conquer the world, and the exact moment when everything would end? A young captive in chains became the keeper of heaven's most terrifying secrets. While pagan priests trembled and kings lost sleep, Daniel stood in the throne room of eternity and returned with prophecies so precise they named empires before they existed. He saw beasts rising from churning seas, horns speaking blasphemies, and a stone cut without hands that would crush every kingdom on earth. Nebuchadnezzar's dream haunted the most powerful man alive, until Daniel revealed a statue of gold, silver, bronze, and iron that mapped human history itself. He decoded mysterious fingers, writing doom on a palace wall the very night an empire fell. He walked with angels, wrestled with prophetic visions that left him physically weak, and saw into the end times with such clarity that his words still send chills down spines today. But here's the mystery. What did Daniel see that was so overwhelming? God commanded him to seal up the vision. Join us as we unlock the prophetic vault of Daniel, where past, present, and future collide. The year was 605 BC, and everything was about to change for the people of Judah. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, the most powerful ruler on earth, had set his sights on Jerusalem. His massive army surrounded the city, and there was no escape. The book of Daniel begins by telling us exactly what happened in chapter 1, verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. King Jehoiakim of Judah faced an impossible choice: fight and watch his city burn, or surrender and hope for mercy. He chose surrender. But the cost was devastating. Daniel chapter 1 verse 2 records the tragic outcome. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim king of Judah into his hand, with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he carried them into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. Think about what this meant. The sacred vessels from God's temple, cups, bowls, and instruments used in worship, were now sitting in a pagan temple in Babylon. For the Jewish people, this wasn't just a military defeat. It felt like God himself had been defeated. The items dedicated to the worship of the one true God were now decorating the shrine of a false god in a foreign land. The temple in Jerusalem, the place where God's presence dwelt, had been raided and emptied of its treasures. But this was only the beginning. Nebuchadnezzar didn't just want gold and silver. He wanted something far more valuable: the future leaders of Judah. He wanted the brightest young minds, the strongest bodies, and the sharpest intellects. He was about to reshape an entire generation. Nebuchadnezzar was not just a conqueror, he was a strategist. He understood that the best way to control a nation wasn't just through military force. You had to capture their culture, their identity, and their future leaders. So he gave a specific order to Ashpenaz, his chief official. Daniel chapter 1 verse 3 tells us, "Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility." Notice the deliberate selection. These weren't random prisoners of war. These were young men from the best families in Judah, princes, nobles, the sons of leaders and officials. They were the cream of the crop, the ones who would have governed Judah in the future. Nebuchadnezzar was essentially kidnapping the next generation of Jewish leadership. But he had very specific requirements. These young men couldn't just be from good families. They had to meet strict criteria. Daniel chapter 1 verses 4 and 5 lay out the profile. Youths without blemish, of good appearance and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace and to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate and of the wine that he drank. They were to be educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time they were to stand before the king. Let's break down what Nebuchadnezzar wanted. First, physical perfection, no defects, handsome, strong. Second, intellectual brilliance, wise, knowledgeable, quick learners. Third, social polish, capable of standing in a royal court without embarrassment. And fourth, adaptability, able to learn an entirely new language and culture. This wasn't just about finding smart people. This was about cultural transformation. These young Jewish men would spend 3 years being completely immersed in Babylonian culture. They would learn the Chaldean language, study Babylonian literature, absorb their worldview, and eat their food. By the end, Nebuchadnezzar hoped they would think like Babylonians, act like Babylonians, and forget they were ever Jews. The 3-year training program was psychological warfare. Strip away their identity, flood them with new information, surround them with luxury, and by the end, they would serve Babylon instead of remembering Judah. It was brilliant, calculated, and devastatingly effective, or at least that was the plan. Among the young men selected for this program were 4 who would change history. Their names were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. We don't know much about their families or exactly where they came from in Judah, but we know they were part of this elite group chosen by Ashpenaz. They were young, probably teenagers, torn from everything they knew and loved. The first thing the Babylonians did was change their names. This wasn't random or accidental. Names in the ancient world carried deep meaning, especially Hebrew names that honored God. Daniel chapter 1 verse 6 introduces them by their Hebrew names. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah. Daniel's name meant God is my judge. Hananiah meant Yahweh is gracious. Mishael meant who is what God is. And Azariah meant Yahweh has helped. Every time someone said their names, it was a declaration about the God of Israel. Their very identities testified to who they belonged to. But Babylon wanted to erase that. Daniel chapter 1 verse 7 tells us what happened next. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar, Hananiah he called Shadrach, Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called Abednego. Belteshazzar meant Bel, protect his life, invoking a Babylonian god. Shadrach possibly meant command of Aku, another pagan deity. Meshach meant who is what Aku is, a direct replacement of God with a false god. Abednego meant servant of Nebo, yet another Babylonian god. Do you see what happened? Their new names didn't just sound different. They replaced the God of Israel with the gods of Babylon. Every time someone called them by their new names, it was supposed to remind them that they served Babylon now, not Yahweh. It was an attack on their identity, their faith, and their very souls. But here's what's remarkable. The Bible continues to call Daniel by his Hebrew name throughout the entire book. Yes, the Babylonians called him Belteshazzar, but God never forgot who he really was. You can change someone's name, but you can't change who they belong to. These 4 young men stood at a crossroads. They could accept their new identity and blend into Babylonian culture, or they could hold on to who they really were. The pressure to conform was enormous. They were surrounded by wealth, power, and luxury. They were being offered the best education in the world. All they had to do was forget Jerusalem and embrace Babylon. The royal training program came with royal privileges. These young men weren't eating prison rations or slave food. They were given the same meals that came from the king's own table. Daniel chapter 1 verse 5 mentioned this earlier, but now it becomes central to the story. The king had assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate and of the wine that he drank. On the surface, this sounds amazing. Imagine being a teenager taken captive from your homeland, and suddenly you're eating like royalty. The finest meats, the richest wines, delicacies that most people would never taste in their entire lives. This was more than just food. It was a symbol of status, favor, and privilege. The king was treating them like his own sons. But for Daniel and his friends, this created a serious problem. The food from the king's table wasn't just any food. In the ancient world, meals from a royal table had spiritual significance. Some of the meat would have been sacrificed to Babylonian gods before it was served. Some of the animals would have been unclean according to Jewish dietary laws: pork, shellfish, and other forbidden foods. The wine might have been used in pagan religious ceremonies. For a faithful Jew, eating this food meant more than just breaking dietary rules. It meant participating in idol worship. It meant saying that the gods of Babylon were acceptable. It meant compromising everything they believed about the God of Israel. Every meal became a spiritual test. Daniel understood what was at stake. This wasn't about being picky or difficult. This was about faithfulness to God in a foreign land. And here's where we see Daniel's character emerge. Daniel chapter 1 verse 8 tells us his decision. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. The word resolved is important. This wasn't a casual decision or an emotional reaction. Daniel thought it through carefully and made a firm commitment in his heart. He drew a line in the sand. He would go along with the new names, learn the new language, study the new literature, but when it came to compromising his relationship with God, he would not budge. Think about the courage this required. Daniel was a teenager in a foreign country with no power, no protection, and no leverage. He was completely dependent on the favor of his captors. One wrong move could mean punishment or death. The easy path was right in front of him. Just eat the food, don't make waves, survive the 3 years, and maybe one day get home. But Daniel chose the hard path. He chose faithfulness over comfort, obedience to God over acceptance by men. And he wasn't alone. His 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, made the same choice. They stood together, unified in their commitment to honor God, no matter the cost. Having made his decision, Daniel now faced a delicate problem: how to refuse the king's food without getting himself killed. Remember, this food was a gift from Nebuchadnezzar himself. Rejecting it could be seen as insulting the king, which in an absolute monarchy could be a death sentence. Daniel needed wisdom, courage, and favor from God. Here's where we see Daniel's brilliance. He didn't stage a protest or make a public scene. He didn't lecture anyone about Jewish dietary laws or condemn Babylonian culture. Instead, he approached the situation with respect, humility, and a practical solution. Daniel chapter 1 verse 8 continues, "Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself." Notice the word asked. Daniel made a request, not a demand. He showed respect for authority even while standing firm on his convictions. This is a remarkable balance, being faithful to God without being needlessly offensive to people. Daniel understood that you can be strong in your beliefs without being harsh in your approach. But even this respectful request put the chief official in a difficult position. Daniel chapter 1 verses 9 and 10 show us his dilemma. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, "I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and your drink. For why should he see that you were in worse condition than the youths who are of your own age? So you would endanger my head with the king." The official actually liked Daniel. God had given Daniel favor in his eyes, which means there was something about Daniel's character and attitude that earned respect. But liking Daniel wasn't enough to make the official risk his own life. His fear was reasonable. If Daniel and his friends looked weak or unhealthy compared to the other trainees, the king would blame him. And when kings like Nebuchadnezzar placed blame, heads literally rolled. The official was caught between wanting to help Daniel and fearing for his own safety. He couldn't officially approve Daniel's request because the consequences were too dangerous. But notice he didn't immediately refuse either. He explained his concern, which gave Daniel an opening to propose a solution. So Daniel went to the guard, who had been assigned to supervise him and his 3 friends directly. This guard worked under the chief official and had daily contact with the young men. Daniel, chapter 1, verse 11 introduces him. Then Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. This was smart strategy. By going to the direct supervisor, Daniel removed some of the risk from the chief official. If something went wrong, the blame would fall on the lower-level guard rather than the chief. It gave everyone a way out. Now Daniel made his pitch. He didn't ask for a permanent change. He didn't demand special treatment indefinitely. Instead, he proposed a short-term test that would prove his point through results, not arguments. Daniel chapter 1, verses 12 and 13 record his proposal. Test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance and the appearance of the youths who eat the king's food be observed by you, and deal with your servants according to what you see. This was brilliant for several reasons. First, it was time-limited, just 10 days. That's not a huge commitment, and if things went badly, they could quickly reverse course. Second, it was measurable. You could actually see the results by comparing them to the other trainees. Third, it put the decision in the guard's hands based on observable evidence, not religious arguments. And fourth, it was respectful. Daniel called himself and his friends your servants and let the guard make the final call. Daniel was essentially saying, "We believe God will honor our faithfulness. We're willing to prove it. Just give us 10 days and judge for yourself." He was putting his faith on the line in a way that could be verified by anyone watching. The guard agreed. Daniel chapter 1 verse 14 tells us, "So he listened to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. And maybe he was curious. Maybe he admired their conviction. Maybe he figured 10 days couldn't hurt. Whatever his reason, he gave them their chance. For 10 days, while the other young men ate rich meats and drank fine wine from the king's table, Daniel and his 3 friends ate vegetables and drank water. It was a simple diet, almost severe compared to the luxury the others enjoyed. Imagine being a teenager and watching your peers feast on delicious food while you eat vegetables and drink water. The temptation to give up must have been real. But they held firm. They trusted that God would honor their faithfulness. They believed that obedience to God's commands was more important than physical comfort or social acceptance. Every meal was an act of worship, a declaration that they belonged to God alone. And they weren't just eating differently. They were praying, trusting, and believing that God would prove himself faithful. They had taken a risk, and now they were waiting to see if God would come through. The 10 days must have felt long. Every morning they woke up wondering if this would be the day they were judged. Every evening they looked at each other, checking for signs of weakness or illness. The 10th day arrived, the moment of truth. The guard looked at Daniel and his 3 friends carefully, examining their faces, their energy, their overall health. Then he compared them to the other young men who had been eating from the king's table. What he saw shocked him. Daniel, chapter 1, verse 15, records the result. At the end of 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. They didn't just look as good as the others. They looked better, healthier, stronger, more robust. Their skin glowed, their eyes were bright, and they had more vitality than the young men who had been eating the richest food in Babylon. This wasn't natural. There's no nutritional science that says vegetables and water for 10 days will make you healthier than people eating a balanced, protein-rich diet. This was supernatural. God had honored their faithfulness with a visible, undeniable blessing. He proved that trusting him is never a losing bet. Think about what this meant for the guard. He had taken a risk in allowing this experiment, and instead of being proven wrong, he witnessed a miracle. The young men who had rejected the king's food were thriving. This wasn't just good news for Daniel, it was protection for the guard too. If anyone asked why these four looked different, he could honestly say they were healthier than everyone else. The guard made his decision. Daniel chapter 1 verse 16 tells us, "So the steward took away their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables." The test became permanent. For the rest of their 3-year training, Daniel and his friends continued eating their simple diet, and God continued blessing them for their faithfulness. But here's what's easy to miss. This blessing wasn't just about physical health. Yes, they looked better, but the deeper truth was that they had maintained their spiritual integrity. They had refused to be compromised by Babylon's culture. They had drawn a line and said, "We will adapt to many things, but we will not betray our God." And God honored that. He always does. When you choose faithfulness over comfort, when you choose obedience over acceptance, when you choose God over everything else, He shows up. Not always in the way you expect, and not always on your timetable, but He shows up. Daniel and his friends had passed their first test in Babylon. They had proven that it was possible to live in a pagan culture without being consumed by it. They had shown that you can be excellent in a worldly system without compromising your heavenly values. They were in Babylon, but Babylon was not in them. The 3 years of training passed. Daniel and his friends studied the literature of the Chaldeans, mastered the Babylonian language, learned the culture and customs of their new home. They were model students, excelling in every area of their education, but their excellence wasn't just natural talent or hard work, it was supernatural empowerment from God. Daniel chapter 1 verse 17 reveals what really happened during those 3 years. "As for these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams." This is a crucial verse. It wasn't just that they studied hard and got smart. God Himself gave them knowledge and understanding. Their minds were supernaturally sharpened by the God of Israel. They learned the same material as everyone else, but they understood it better. They read the same books, but they grasped concepts others missed. God was preparing them for something far greater than being court officials in Babylon. He was preparing them to be His witnesses in the heart of a pagan empire. And Daniel received something extra, a special gift for understanding visions and dreams. This wasn't something he learned from Babylonian teachers. This was a prophetic ability given directly by God. In a culture that highly valued dreams and supernatural knowledge, God was equipping Daniel to be His spokesman. Little did Daniel know how important this gift would become. The 3 years ended. It was time for the final examination. All the young men who had been trained would now stand before King Nebuchadnezzar himself to be evaluated. This was the moment that determined their futures. Would they serve in the king's palace, or would they be assigned to lesser positions? Everything came down to this interview. Daniel chapter 1 verse 18 sets the scene. "And at the end of the time, when the king had commanded that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. One by one, or perhaps in groups, the young men appeared before the most powerful man on earth. He questioned them, tested their knowledge, evaluated their wisdom and understanding, and when it was Daniel's turn, along with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, something extraordinary happened. Daniel chapter 1 verse 19 tells us, "And the king spoke with them, and among all of them none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king. Out of all the brilliant young men from Judah, from all the nobles and princes who had been selected for their intelligence and skill, these 4 stood out above everyone else." Nebuchadnezzar, who had access to the brightest minds in his entire empire, recognized that these 4 were exceptional. They weren't just good, they were the best. The verse says, they stood before the king, which means they were selected for direct service to Nebuchadnezzar himself. They would be his personal advisors, part of his inner circle, consulted on the most important matters of state. From captives to counselors, from prisoners to princes, God had elevated them to the highest positions in Babylon. But the story doesn't end there. Daniel chapter 1 verse 20 gives us the final evaluation. And in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in all his kingdom. 10 times better. Not slightly better, not marginally superior, 10 times better than the professional wise men who had spent their entire lives studying Babylonian wisdom. These were young men in their early 20s, foreigners who had only studied for 3 years, and they surpassed experts who had decades of experience. This wasn't natural ability. This was God showing Babylon that the wisdom of heaven exceeds the wisdom of earth. Think about what this meant. Every time Nebuchadnezzar had a difficult question, every time he needed insight or understanding, these 4 Jewish young men had better answers than his experienced Babylonian advisors. The God they refused to deny was proving himself superior to all the gods of Babylon. Their faithfulness in the small thing, refusing the king's food, had led to blessing in everything else. And Daniel remained in this position of influence for decades. The final verse of chapter 1 tells us, "And Daniel was there until the first year of King Cyrus." That's approximately 70 years of service, through multiple kings and even through the fall of Babylon itself. The young teenager who chose vegetables over compromise became one of the most influential men in world history. The test was over. Daniel and his friends had proven that you can live in Babylon without bowing to Babylon. They had shown that faithfulness to God leads to blessing, even when that faithfulness is costly. They had demonstrated that God's wisdom surpasses all human knowledge. And now their real work was about to begin. Something was desperately wrong with the king. Nebuchadnezzar, the man who ruled the greatest empire on earth, couldn't sleep. Night after night, he lay awake, his mind churning with images he couldn't grasp. When he did fall asleep, dreams came, vivid, powerful dreams that felt like messages. But when morning arrived, the details vanished like smoke, leaving only dread. Daniel chapter 2 verse 1 captures this moment. In the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. This wasn't ordinary insomnia. The word troubled suggests deep agitation, like a storm churning inside him. His spirit knew something significant had been revealed, but his mind couldn't hold on to it. Think about what this meant for a man like Nebuchadnezzar. He commanded armies and built cities, but he couldn't control his own mind. He couldn't force himself to remember. Night after night, the dream came, and night after night, it vanished with dawn, leaving only anxiety that gnawed at his soul. In ancient Babylon, dreams were taken very seriously. Kings believed the gods spoke through dreams, giving warnings or revealing the future. A dream this persistent, this troubling, couldn't be ignored. It demanded answers. It required interpretation. The king's peace depended on understanding what the gods were trying to tell him through these nightly visions that tormented his rest. The royal summons went out, and soon the throne room filled with experts in robes and carrying scrolls. Daniel chapter 2 verse 2 lists who came. Then the king commanded that the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king. These were professionals who claimed supernatural knowledge, magicians who performed rituals, enchanters who used divination, sorcerers who practiced dark arts, and Chaldeans who studied stars and ancient texts. They stood confidently before the king, ready to hear the dream and provide their interpretation. This was their job, their livelihood. But Nebuchadnezzar was about to change everything. Daniel chapter 2 verse 3, "And the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream." The Chaldeans responded normally. Daniel chapter 2, verse 4. Then the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, "O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation." But Nebuchadnezzar wasn't following the normal procedure. Daniel chapter 2, verse 5 contains his shocking demand. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, "The word from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins." He demanded they tell him the dream itself, then interpret it. Failure meant gruesome death and total ruin for their families. Daniel chapter 2, verse 6 added the reward. "But if you show the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor." Why this impossible demand? Because Nebuchadnezzar suspected they were frauds who told kings what they wanted to hear. Anyone can make up an interpretation after hearing a dream, but if they could tell him the dream itself, something only he knew, then their power was genuine. It was a perfect test, brilliant and ruthless, designed to expose truth or deception once and for all. The wise men were trapped with no way out. Daniel chapter 2, verse 7, they answered a second time and said, "Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show its interpretation." They were stalling desperately, hoping the king would reconsider. But Nebuchadnezzar saw through their tactic. Daniel chapter 2, verse 8, the king answered and said, "I know with certainty that you are trying to gain time, because you see that the word from me is firm." Then he accused them directly. Daniel chapter 2, verse 9, "If you do not make the dream known to me, there is but one sentence for you. You have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the times change. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me its interpretation." He believed they had been lying to him for years, waiting for circumstances to change so their vague predictions could seem accurate. The wise men had no options left except brutal honesty. Daniel chapter 2, verses 10 and 11. The Chaldeans answered the king and said, "There is not a man on earth who can meet the king's demand, for no great and powerful king has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or Chaldean. The thing that the king asks is difficult, and no one can show it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh." They admitted no human could do this. Only the gods could reveal it, and the gods don't communicate with humans. It was the most honest confession they'd ever made, but it sealed their doom. Nebuchadnezzar's rage exploded. Daniel chapter 2, verse 12. Because of this, the king was angry and very furious, and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. He ordered every wise man in Babylon executed. Daniel chapter 2, verse 13 reveals the crisis. So the decree went out, and the wise men were about to be slain, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Daniel hadn't been in the throne room, but he was classified as a wise man. The executioners were coming for him too, along with his 3 friends. When guards arrived to arrest Daniel, he didn't panic. Daniel chapter 2, verse 14. Then Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. Arioch was the chief executioner, but Daniel's calm response made him pause. Daniel chapter 2, verse 15. He declared to Arioch, the king's captain, "Why is the decree of the king so urgent?" Then Arioch made the matter known to Daniel. Arioch explained everything: the dream, the impossible demand, the wise men's failure, the king's fury. Daniel immediately saw what others had missed. The other wise men served distant, silent gods. But Daniel served the God of Israel, who actually spoke to his prophets and revealed mysteries. This crisis was an opportunity to prove God's power in Babylon. Daniel made a bold move. Daniel chapter 2, verse 16. And Daniel went in and requested the king to appoint him a time that he might show the interpretation to the king. He walked into the palace during the king's murderous rage and asked for a chance to do what everyone else had failed to do. Nebuchadnezzar granted his request, giving him time. Daniel went home and gathered his friends. Daniel chapter 2, verse 17. Then Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. These were the same young men who had stood with him years earlier when they refused the king's food. Now they faced death together again. Daniel chapter 2, verse 18 records what they did and told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. The four young men prayed together, asking God for mercy and revelation. They needed divine intervention, a miracle that only God could provide. Then they waited to see if God would answer their desperate prayers. That night, God answered. Daniel chapter 2 verse 19 tells us simply and powerfully, "Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night." God showed Daniel exactly what Nebuchadnezzar had dreamed, every detail, every image, perfectly clear. This wasn't a vague impression or something Daniel had to interpret and hope he got right. It was a direct, detailed, unmistakable vision, showing him the precise dream that had troubled the king. The wise men of Babylon had declared this impossible. They said only the gods could reveal such things, and the gods don't speak to humans. But the God of heaven had done the impossible. He had reached across the barrier between divine and human and revealed the mystery. The God of a conquered people had proven himself more powerful than all the gods of the conquering empire. When Daniel woke up, he knew everything. He knew the dream and its meaning. The impossible question had been answered. God had done in one night what all the wise men of Babylon couldn't do in a lifetime. But notice what Daniel did first. The second half of Daniel chapter 2 verse 19. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Before doing anything else, before telling anyone, before rushing to save his own life, Daniel stopped to worship. He recognized this was pure grace from God. This wasn't about Daniel's cleverness. It was about God's mercy and power. Daniel's first response wasn't relief or excitement about survival. It was worship. This reveals everything about his character and why God could trust him with such revelations. Daniel poured out his heart in one of the most beautiful prayers in Scripture. Daniel chapter 2, verses 20 through 23, preserve his complete prayer. Daniel answered and said, "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you, for you have made known to us the king's matter." The Daniel blessed God's name forever, acknowledging that wisdom and might belonged to God alone. The wise men of Babylon had claimed wisdom, but they had none. True wisdom comes only from God. Daniel recognized God's sovereignty over history. He changes times and seasons, removes kings, and sets up kings. Even Nebuchadnezzar ruled only because God allowed it. Daniel praised God for giving wisdom as a gift, not something humans achieve. He acknowledged that God reveals mysteries and knows what is hidden in darkness. Nothing is dark to God. He is the source of all light and truth. Then Daniel made it personal, calling him the God of my fathers, connecting this moment to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He thanked God for giving him wisdom and for revealing what they had asked in prayer. Daniel gave God all the credit. You have given me wisdom. You have made known to me what we asked. You have made known to us the king's matter. Every word pointed back to God as the source. Daniel took no credit for himself. He also said, we and us, Acknowledging this was an answer to united prayer with his three friends. This prayer shows Daniel's theology. God is sovereign over history, reveals mysteries, gives wisdom as a gift, dwells in light and answers prayer. It also shows his heart, humble, grateful, reverent, and focused on worship before action. This moment recalibrated Daniel's heart, reminding him this wasn't about him. Now he was ready to go to the king. Daniel went to Arioch first. Daniel chapter 2, verse 24. Therefore Daniel went in to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus to him, "Do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show the king the interpretation." His first concern was saving the other wise men's lives, the same men whose failure had endangered him. This shows Daniel's character. He wasn't vindictive or self-serving. Arioch brought Daniel to the king quickly. Daniel chapter 2, verse 25. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus to him, "I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation." The king asked if Daniel could really do this. Daniel chapter 2, verse 26. The king declared to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, "Are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation?" Daniel's response redirected all attention to God. Daniel chapter 2, verses 27 and 28. Daniel answered the king and said, "No wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head as you lay in bed are these." Daniel agreed no human could do this, but introduced the king to the God of heaven who does reveal mysteries. Then Daniel told him what he'd been thinking before sleep. Daniel chapter 2, verse 29. "To you, O king, as you lay in bed, came thoughts of what would be after this, and he who reveals mysteries made known to you what is to be." Before revealing the dream, Daniel made one more statement. Daniel chapter 2, verse 30. "But as for me, this mystery has not been revealed to me because of any wisdom that I have more than all the living, but in order that the interpretation may be made known to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your mind." Daniel refused personal credit. This was so the king would get his answer. Then Daniel described the dream. Daniel chapter 2, verses 31 through 35. "You saw, O king, and behold, a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this image was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold, all together were broken in pieces, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth." Nebuchadnezzar must have been stunned. This was exactly what he'd seen, every detail perfect. The impossible had happened. Now came the interpretation that would reveal the future of human history. Daniel chapter 2, verses 37 and 38. "You, O king, the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, and the might, and the glory, and into whose hand he has given wherever they dwell, the children of man, the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heavens, making you rule over them all, you are the head of gold." Nebuchadnezzar was the head of gold. His Babylonian empire was the first kingdom, but Daniel made clear that his power came from God. God had given him everything. Daniel chapter 2, verse 39, Another kingdom inferior to you shall arise after you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. Two more kingdoms would follow, one of silver, one of bronze, then the fourth kingdom. Daniel chapter 2 verse 40. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things, and like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these. This kingdom would be powerful and destructive like iron, crushing everything before it, but it had weakness. Daniel chapter 2, verses 41 through 43. And as you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom, but some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with the soft clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. The fourth kingdom would be divided internally. It would try to create unity through political marriages and alliances, but it wouldn't work. Iron and clay don't mix. The kingdom would remain fractured despite its strength. Then came the most important part, God's kingdom. Daniel chapter 2, verses 44 and 45. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever, just as you saw that a stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. A great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation sure. During the time of the fourth kingdom, God himself would establish an eternal kingdom. This wouldn't be another human empire. This would be God's kingdom, made without human hands, that would destroy all earthly kingdoms and last forever. It would fill the whole earth and never end. Daniel ended with absolute certainty. The dream was certain, the interpretation sure. This was God's plan for history. King Nebuchadnezzar had a new project that would demonstrate his power to the entire world. He ordered workers to construct an enormous statue made entirely of gold. Daniel chapter 3 verse 1 describes what he built. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits and its breadth 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. 60 cubits high, about 90 feet tall, the height of a 9-story building, 6 cubits wide, about 9 feet across. This wasn't a small idol hidden in a temple. This was a towering monument, visible for miles across the flat plain of Dura. The entire structure was covered in gleaming gold that reflected the sun, impossible to miss or ignore. Why build this? The timing is revealing. Nebuchadnezzar had just learned his golden kingdom would be replaced by inferior kingdoms. Perhaps this statue was his defiant response. My kingdom will last forever. Perhaps it was designed to unify his diverse empire under one religious symbol everyone would worship. The plain of Dura was perfect for massive gatherings. Thousands could assemble there, and the statue would dominate everything. Once construction was complete, the king summoned his officials. Daniel chapter 3 verse 2, Then King Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather the satraps, the prefects and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Everyone who mattered received the summons. Satraps ruling regions, prefects commanding military districts, governors managing provinces, councillors advising on policy, treasurers controlling finances, justices administering law, magistrates handling local government. Every level of authority throughout the empire was commanded to attend. Daniel chapter 3 verse 3. Then the satraps, the prefects and the governors, the councillors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. They traveled from every corner of the empire and stood in massive ranks before the golden statue, thousands representing every conquered nation. Then a herald stepped forward with a proclamation. Daniel chapter 3 verses 4 and 5. And the herald proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up." The command was clear. When the music played, everyone must fall down and worship. Not just bow politely, worship it. This was a religious command, and the consequence for refusing, Daniel chapter 3 verse 6, "And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace." No trial, no appeal, no second chance. Refuse to bow, and you die immediately in the most horrible way, burned alive. The moment arrived. The musicians began to play. Daniel chapter 3 verse 7. "Therefore, as soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Like a wave, thousands dropped to the ground, officials ruling provinces, commanders leading armies, judges deciding life and death. Everyone fell on their faces before the statue. The plain became a sea of prostrate bodies, all worshipping as commanded. All except 3 men. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego remained standing, while everyone around them bowed. These 3 Jewish men stood firm, refusing to worship the image. They stood out like 3 trees in a flattened field, their defiance visible to all. Someone noticed immediately. Daniel chapter 3 verse 8. "Therefore at that time certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews." These weren't concerned friends. These were malicious accusers eager to destroy them. Probably fellow officials who resented their high positions. They approached the king carefully. Daniel chapter 3 verses 9 through 11. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace." They started with flattery, then reminded him of his decree and the penalty. They were setting their trap carefully. Then the accusation. Daniel chapter 3 verse 12. "There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." Notice the phrasing. Certain Jews, foreigners the king had promoted. They made it personal. These men ignore you, don't serve your gods, won't worship your image. They framed it as disloyalty. Nebuchadnezzar was furious, but wanted to hear from them. Daniel chapter 3, verse 13. "Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought." He questioned them directly. Daniel chapter 3, verse 14. "Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, 'Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up?' Then he offered a second chance. Daniel chapter 3, verse 15. "Now if you are ready when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? Bow when the music plays, and everything is forgiven. Refuse and die." Then the mocking challenge, "What God can save you from me?" The three men didn't hesitate. Daniel chapter 3, verses 16 through 18. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." Their answer was remarkable. We don't need to defend ourselves. Our God can deliver us, but even if he doesn't, even if we die, we still won't bow. This was pure faith. Nebuchadnezzar exploded with rage. Daniel chapter 3, verse 19. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated. His face changed with fury, 7 times hotter. This wasn't just execution, this was making an example. He ordered his strongest soldiers to handle it. Daniel chapter 3, verse 20. And he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. The soldiers bound them tightly. Daniel chapter 3, verse 21. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and their other garments, and they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace. They didn't even remove their clothes, just bound them fully dressed. But the heat was overwhelming. Daniel chapter 3, verse 22. Because the king's order was urgent and the furnace overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The very soldiers throwing them in died from the heat. They got close enough to hurl the prisoners into the flames, but the superheated air killed them instantly. The king's rage had created a fire so intense it killed his own men. Daniel chapter 3, verse 23. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the burning fiery furnace. They fell into the flames, tied and helpless. As far as anyone watching could tell, they were dead. No one could survive that inferno. The furnace was so hot it had killed trained soldiers just from approaching it. Nebuchadnezzar was watching. Suddenly, he jumped up in shock. Daniel chapter 3, verse 24. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." He asked his counselors to confirm, 3 men, right? Yes, they said, 3 men bound and helpless. But something impossible was happening. Daniel chapter 3, verse 25. He answered and said, "But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." 4 men, not 3. And they weren't burning. They were walking around calmly. The ropes were gone, but the men were unharmed. They were walking through fire that had killed soldiers from proximity, and they weren't even singed. And there was a 4th person, someone whose appearance was different, like a son of the gods. This figure was supernatural. Many believe this was a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, personally present with his servants in the fire. The king approached the furnace. Daniel chapter 3, verse 26. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace. He declared, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire. He called them servants of the Most High God. They walked out of the inferno. Everyone gathered to examine them. Daniel chapter 3, verse 27. And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. The fire had no power over them, their hair wasn't singed, their clothes showed no damage, they didn't even smell like smoke. It was a complete miracle witnessed by every important official in the empire. Years passed. Nebuchadnezzar's empire grew, but so did his pride. Then he had another troubling dream. Daniel chapter 4, verses 4 and 5. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and prospering in my palace. I saw a dream that made me afraid. As I lay in bed, the fancies and the visions of my head alarmed me. He called his wise men, but they couldn't interpret it. Daniel chapter 4, verse 7. Then the magicians, the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers came in, and I told them the dream, but they could not make known to me its interpretation. Finally, Daniel came. The king described his dream. Daniel chapter 4, verses 10 through 12. The visions of my head as I lay in bed were these. I saw, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew and became strong, and its top reached to heaven, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth. Its leaves were beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it, and the birds of the heavens lived in its branches, and all flesh was fed from it. A magnificent tree reaching heaven, visible everywhere, providing for all creatures. Then something terrible happened. Daniel chapter 4, verses 13 and 14. I saw in the visions of my head as I lay in bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven. He proclaimed aloud and said thus, Chop down the tree and lop off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it and the birds from its branches. A heavenly being commanded the tree destroyed. But there was more. Daniel chapter 4, verses 15 and 16. But leave the stump of its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze, amid the tender grass of the field. Let him be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Let his mind be changed from a man's, and let a beast's mind be given to him, and let 7 periods of time pass over him. The stump would remain, but someone's mind would be changed from human to beast for 7 years. Daniel was troubled by the interpretation. Daniel chapter 4, verse 19. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was dismayed for a while, and his thoughts alarmed him. He explained the tree represented Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel chapter 4, verses 24 and 25. This is the interpretation, O king. It is a decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king, that you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. You shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and you shall be wet with the dew of heaven, and 7 periods of time shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will. The king would lose his mind and live like an animal for 7 years until he learned God rules, not kings. But there was hope. Daniel chapter 4, verse 26. And as it was commanded to leave the stump of the roots of the tree, your kingdom shall be confirmed for you from the time that you know that heaven rules. Daniel urged repentance. Daniel chapter 4, verse 27. Therefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by practicing righteousness, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the oppressed, that there may perhaps be a lengthening of your prosperity. But Nebuchadnezzar didn't change. 12 months later, pride consumed him. Daniel chapter 4, verse 30. And the king answered and said, Is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power as a royal residence and for the glory of my majesty? Judgment fell instantly. Daniel chapter 4, verses 32 and 33. And you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. And you shall be made to eat grass like an ox. And 7 periods of time shall pass over you, until you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will. Immediately the word was fulfilled against Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from among men, and ate grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hair grew as long as eagle's feathers, and his nails were like birds' claws. After 7 years, he looked to heaven. Daniel chapter 4, verse 34. At the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. His sanity and kingdom were restored. Years later, Belshazzar ruled Babylon. He threw a massive feast. Daniel chapter 5, verse 1. King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of the 1,000. Then he made a terrible decision. Daniel chapter 5, verses 2 and 3. Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, commanded that the vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar his father had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem be brought, that the king and his lords, his wives and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought in the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords, his wives and his concubines drank from them. Sacred vessels from God's temple used as party cups, deliberate blasphemy. Daniel chapter 5, verse 4. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood and stone. They praised idols while drinking from God's vessels. Suddenly, terror struck. Daniel chapter 5, verses 5 and 6. Immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, opposite the lampstand. And the king saw the hand as it wrote. Then the king's color changed, and his thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way, and his knees knocked together. A disembodied hand writing on the wall. The king's face went pale, his knees knocked in terror. He called his wise men. Daniel chapter 5, verse 8. Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king the interpretation. They couldn't read it. The queen remembered Daniel. They brought him in. Daniel refused rewards, but agreed to interpret. He reminded Belshazzar of Nebuchadnezzar's lesson, then accused him. Daniel chapter 5, verses 22 and 23. And you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this, but you have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven. Then Daniel read the writing. Daniel chapter 5, verse 25. And this is the writing that was inscribed, Mene, Mene, Tekel, and Parsin. He interpreted. Daniel chapter 5, verses 26 through 28. This is the interpretation of the matter. Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Peres, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. God has counted your days, they're over. You've been weighed and found lacking. Your kingdom is given to your enemies. Belshazzar honored Daniel despite the terrible news. Daniel chapter 5, verse 29. Then Belshazzar gave the command, and Daniel was clothed with purple. A chain of gold was put around his neck, and a proclamation was made about him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. But the honors meant nothing. That same night the prophecy came true. Daniel chapter 5, verse 30. That very night, Belshazzar the Chaldean king was killed. The king who mocked God died before dawn. Daniel chapter 5, verse 31. And Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. The silver kingdom from Nebuchadnezzar's dream had arrived. The head of gold was replaced, exactly as God had foretold decades earlier. Babylon's golden age was over, and a new empire ruled the world. The prophecy was fulfilled with perfect accuracy, proving once again that God controls the rise and fall of kingdoms. In the first year of King Belshazzar's reign over Babylon, Daniel had a dream that would shake him deeply. This wasn't someone else's dream. God gave Daniel his own terrifying vision of the future. Daniel chapter 7, verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel was lying in bed when visions filled his mind. These were prophetic visions so vivid that Daniel immediately wrote them down. The vision began with chaos. Daniel chapter 7 verse 2. Daniel declared, "I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea." The four winds from every direction were churning a great sea violently. Then creatures emerged. Daniel chapter 7 verse 3. And four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. Four monstrous creatures rose from the waters, each different and terrifying. The first appeared. Daniel chapter 7 verse 4. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and the mind of a man was given to it. A lion with eagle's wings. But its wings were torn off. It stood upright like a human and received a human mind. The second rose. Daniel chapter 7 verse 5. And behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, "Arise, devour much flesh." A bear raised on one side with 3 ribs in its mouth commanded to devour. The third appeared. Daniel chapter 7 verse 6. After this I looked, and behold another like a leopard with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. A leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads that would rule. The fourth was most terrifying. Daniel chapter 7 verse 7. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. This beast defied description, iron teeth devouring everything, breaking what it couldn't eat, trampling the rest. It had 10 horns, then something stranger. Daniel chapter 7 verse 8. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. A little horn grew, uprooting 3 horns. This horn had human eyes, and a mouth speaking arrogant things. The scene shifted from earth to heaven. Daniel chapter 7 verse 9. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. Thrones were set, and the Ancient of Days, God himself, took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, his hair like pure wool, his throne made of fiery flames. The scene intensified. Daniel chapter 7 verse 10. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. Fire streamed from God's presence. 1,000,000 angels served him. 100,000,000 stood before him. The court sat for judgment, and books were opened. The little horn kept speaking. Daniel chapter 7 verse 11. I looked then, because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. The fourth beast was killed, destroyed, and thrown into fire. Daniel chapter 7 verse 12. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. The other beasts lost power, but continued existing. Then came the most important moment. Daniel chapter 7 verse 13. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. Someone described as one like a son of man came with clouds, brought before the Ancient of Days. What did he receive? Daniel chapter 7 verse 14. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. He received dominion, glory, and an eternal kingdom over all peoples. Unlike earthly kingdoms, this would last forever. Daniel was troubled and asked for understanding. Daniel chapter 7 verse 16, I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of the things. The angel explained. Daniel chapter 7 verse 17, these four great beasts are four kings who shall arise out of the earth. The beasts represented four kingdoms, but there was hope. Daniel chapter 7 verse 18, but the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, forever and ever. God's people would ultimately receive the eternal kingdom. 2 years later, Daniel had another vision. Daniel chapter 8 verse 2, and I saw in the vision, and when I saw, I was in Susa the citadel, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in the vision, and I was at the Ulai Canal. In his vision, Daniel found himself in Susa by the Ulai Canal. He saw something unusual. Daniel chapter 8 verse 3. I raised my eyes and saw, and behold, a ram standing on the bank of the canal. It had two horns, and both horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. A ram with two horns, one higher than the other. Daniel chapter 8 verse 4. I saw the ram charging westward and northward and southward. No beast could stand before it, and there was no one who could rescue from its power. It did as it pleased and became great. The ram charged in three directions, unstoppable. Then something else appeared. Daniel chapter 8 verse 5. As I was considering, behold, a male goat came from the west across the face of the whole earth, without touching the ground. And the goat had a conspicuous horn between its eyes. A goat from the west, moving so fast it seemed to fly, with one prominent horn. The goat attacked. Daniel chapter 8, verses 6 and 7. He came to the ram with the two horns, which I had seen standing on the bank of the canal, and he ran at him in his powerful wrath. I saw him come close to the ram, and he was enraged against him and struck the ram and broke his two horns. And the ram had no power to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled on him. The goat, charged with fury, broke both the ram's horns and trampled it completely. Then something unexpected. Daniel chapter 8 verse 8. Then the goat became exceedingly great. But when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and instead of it, there came up four conspicuous horns toward the four winds of heaven. At peak power, the great horn broke, and four horns grew in its place. The vision continued. Daniel chapter 8 verse 9. Out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. From one horn a little horn emerged. This little horn became arrogant. Daniel chapter 8 verses 10 and 11. It grew great, even to the host of heaven. And some of the host and some of the stars it threw down to the ground and trampled on them. It became great, even as great as the prince of the host. And the regular burnt offering was taken away from him, and the place of his sanctuary was overthrown. It exalted itself against heaven, stopped the daily sacrifice, and overthrew the sanctuary. Angels discussed how long. Daniel chapter 8, verse 14. And he said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful state. Gabriel appeared to explain. Daniel chapter 8, verse 20. As for the ram that you saw with the two horns, these are the kings of Media and Persia. Daniel chapter 8 verse 21. And the goat is the king of Greece, and the great horn between his eyes is the first king. When Darius took over Babylon, he organized the government. Daniel chapter 6 verse 1. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom. He appointed 120 governors. Daniel chapter 6 verses 2 and 3, and over them 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps should give account, so that the king might suffer no loss. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. 3 officials oversaw them, including Daniel. Daniel excelled because of his excellent spirit, and the king planned to promote him over everyone. This made others jealous. Daniel chapter 6, verse 4. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom. But they could find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him. They searched for corruption but found nothing. They needed a different strategy. Daniel chapter 6, verse 5. Then these men said, "We shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God." They would use his faith against him. They proposed a law to the king. Daniel chapter 6, verse 7. All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the governors, are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction, that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. For 30 days, no one could pray to anyone except the king. Violators would face lions. The king signed it. Daniel chapter 6, verse 9, Therefore King Darius signed the document and injunction. What did Daniel do? Daniel chapter 6, verse 10, When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he had done previously. Daniel prayed exactly as always, 3 times daily, windows open toward Jerusalem. No hiding. They caught him and reported him. The king couldn't change the law. Reluctantly, he gave the order. Daniel chapter 6, verse 16. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. They sealed the den. The king couldn't sleep. At dawn, he rushed there. Daniel chapter 6, verse 20. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? Daniel's voice answered. Daniel chapter 6, verse 22. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me. Daniel was alive, completely unharmed. The conspirators were then thrown to the lions and killed instantly. In Darius's first year, Daniel was reading scripture. Daniel chapter 9, verse 2. In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, perceived in the books the number of years that, according to the word of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet, must pass before the end of the desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. Daniel realized from Jeremiah's prophecy that Jerusalem's desolation would last 70 years. The time was almost up. This moved him to intense prayer. Daniel chapter 9, verse 3. Then I turned my face to the Lord God, seeking him by prayer and pleas for mercy with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. He confessed his people's sins. Daniel chapter 9, verse 5. We have sinned and done wrong, and acted wickedly and rebelled, turning aside from your commandments and rules. He pleaded for mercy. Daniel chapter 9, Verse 18. O my God, incline your ear and hear. Open your eyes and see our desolations and the city that is called by your name. For we do not present our pleas before you because of our righteousness, but because of your great mercy. While praying, Gabriel came. Daniel chapter 9, verse 21. While I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the first, came to me in swift flight at the time of the evening sacrifice. Gabriel explained. Daniel chapter 9, verse 22. He made me understand, speaking with me and saying, O Daniel, I have now come out to give you insight and understanding. He delivered a crucial prophecy. Daniel chapter 9, verse 24. 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, and to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal both vision and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place. So 70 weeks, 490 years, were decreed to accomplish 6 things. Gabriel broke down the timeline. Daniel chapter 9, verse 25. Know therefore and understand that from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks. Then for 62 weeks it shall be built again with squares and moat, but in a troubled time. From the decree to rebuild Jerusalem to the Messiah would be 69 weeks, 483 years. Then a shocking prediction. Daniel chapter 9, verse 26, and after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The Messiah would be cut off, killed. The city and sanctuary would be destroyed again. Gabriel described the final week. Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. Someone would make a covenant for 7 years. Halfway through, he would stop sacrifices. In Cyrus's 3rd year, Daniel received another vision. Daniel chapter 10, verse 1. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar. And the word was true, and it was a great conflict. The vision concerned a great conflict. Daniel had been mourning. Daniel chapter 10, verses 2 and 3. In those days I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 weeks. I ate no delicacies, no meat or wine entered my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all, for the full 3 weeks. He fasted for 3 weeks. On the 24th day, he was by the Tigris. Daniel chapter 10, verse 4. On the 24th day of the 1st month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, that is, the Tigris, then he saw something terrifying. Daniel chapter 10, verses 5 and 6. I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a man clothed in linen, with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude. A glorious being appeared, linen robes, gold belt, body like beryl, face like lightning, eyes like torches, arms and legs like bronze, voice like a multitude. The vision overwhelmed Daniel. Daniel chapter 10, verse 8. So I was left alone, and saw this great vision, and no strength was left in me. My radiant appearance was fearfully changed, and I retained no strength. All strength left him. When the being spoke, Daniel collapsed. Daniel chapter 10, verse 9. Then I heard the sound of his words, and as I heard the sound of his words, I fell on my face in a deep sleep with my face to the ground. A hand touched him. Daniel chapter 10, verse 10. And behold, a hand touched me, and set me trembling on my hands and knees. The being spoke. Daniel chapter 10, verse 11. And he said to me, O Daniel, Man greatly loved, understand the words that I speak to you, and stand upright, for now I have been sent to you. Called man greatly loved, Daniel stood trembling. The angel explained. Daniel chapter 10 verses 12 and 13. Then he said to me, Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and humbled yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, but Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. From day one, God heard. But the angel was delayed by spiritual warfare. A demonic prince fought him for 21 days until Michael helped. The angel's mission. Daniel chapter 10 verse 14. And came to make you understand what is to happen to your people in the latter days. For the vision is for days yet to come. He came to reveal the future, the latter days. The angel revealed detailed prophecies about future kingdoms. He started with Persia. Daniel chapter 11 verse 2. And now I will show you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings shall arise in Persia, and a 4th shall be far richer than all of them. And when he has become strong through his riches, he shall stir up all against the kingdom of Greece. 3 more Persian kings, then a 4th extremely rich, who would stir conflict with Greece, then a mighty king. Daniel chapter 11, verses 3 and 4. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do as he wills. And as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, but not to his posterity. A mighty king would rule powerfully, but his kingdom would divide into 4 parts. The prophecy focused on 2 kingdoms, north and south. Daniel chapter 11 verse 5. Then the king of the south shall be strong, but one of his princes shall be stronger than he, and shall rule. They would attempt peace through marriage. Daniel chapter 11 verse 6. After some years they shall make an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the strength of her arm. The alliance would fail, and she would be killed. Wars would continue. Then an evil king, Daniel chapter 11 verse 21, in his place shall arise a contemptible person to whom royal majesty has not been given. He shall come in without warning and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. This contemptible king would take power through deception. He would attack God's people. Daniel chapter 11 verse 31. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress, and shall take away the regular burnt offering. And they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. He would profane the temple and stop sacrifices. Daniel chapter 11 verse 32. He shall seduce with flattery those who violate the covenant, but the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. But those who know God would resist. He would exalt himself. Daniel chapter 11 verse 36. And the king shall do as he wills. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods. He would exalt himself above every god. His end. Daniel chapter 11, verse 45. And he shall pitch his palatial tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end with none to help him. He would come to his end with no help. The angel's final message concerned the very end. Daniel chapter 12 verse 1. At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince who has charge of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never has been since there was a nation till that time. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. Michael will arise. There will be unprecedented trouble. But God's people will be delivered, everyone in the book of life. Then the resurrection. Daniel chapter 12 verse 2. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. The dead will rise, some to everlasting life, others to eternal shame. There will be rewards. Daniel chapter 12 verse 3, and those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. The wise will shine like the sky. Those who lead many to righteousness will shine like stars forever. The angel instructed Daniel. Daniel chapter 12 verse 4, but you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Seal the prophecy until the end times when knowledge would increase. Daniel saw two other angels. One asked a question. Daniel chapter 12 verse 6. And someone said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream, how long shall it be till the end of these wonders? The answer came with an oath. Daniel chapter 12 verse 7. And I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream. He raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and swore by him who lives forever, that it would be for a time, times, and half a time. 3.5 years. When God's people seem defeated, deliverance will come. Daniel didn't understand. Daniel chapter 12 verse 8. I heard, but I did not understand. Then I said, O my Lord, what shall be the outcome of these things? The angel responded. Daniel chapter 12 verse 9. He said, Go your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. Go your way. The words are sealed until the end. Daniel chapter 12 verse 10. Many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined, but the wicked shall act wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise shall understand. Many would be refined, but the wicked would continue. The angel gave time periods. Daniel chapter 12 verse 11. And from the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Then another number, Daniel chapter 12 verse 12. Blessed is he who waits and arrives at the 1,335 days. Those who wait and reach 1,335 days are blessed. The angel's final words were personal and comforting. Daniel chapter 12 verse 13. But go your way till the end, and you shall rest and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days. Go your way, live faithfully. You will rest, die, but you will rise again and stand in your assigned place. Daniel would receive his inheritance at the resurrection. If this journey through Daniel's life has impacted you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss another biblical story that could change your perspective. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that God is still sovereign over every kingdom, every nation, every circumstance. And leave a comment telling us which part of Daniel's story spoke to you most powerfully. Daniel stood faithful in Babylon. Where is God calling you to stand faithful today?